There we go. Well guys, welcome back to another episode of the Guides Network. Today, we're actually going to take another episode of the Guides Network. Go ahead and let this fish go. We're going to talk to you about my top 5 baits that I can't live without for Lake Fork spring bass fishing.
Oh my God!
Well guys, you know, spring is obviously just a wonderful time of year to be a bass fisherman. It's also a time of year that can be somewhat overwhelming. There's a lot of different ways to go catch fish. You can kind of catch them in several different depths. You can catch them pre-spawn, post-spawn. You can catch them on beds. You can catch them around beds. You can catch them on a brim spawn, a shad spawn. A lot of different things that you can do. So today's video is designed to help you narrow down your focus. Focus on a few baits, and it doesn't have to be my particular 5 baits, but maybe this can inspire you to narrow your deck of your boat down to fewer baits and really center your focus, because almost any kind of way that you want to catch them you can, but it's hard to get on something good and consistent if you're chasing your tail trying a million different things throughout the day. So let's get into my top 5 baits now. Y'all just saw me catch one off a bed, so obviously sight fishing, if you watch this channel, you know it's one of my favorite ways to do it. Probably is my favorite way to do it, arguably. It's up there for sure. When I'm sight fishing, this is the rig that I go to. This is a little Texas rig. I use 1/4 ounce to 3/8 ounce, depending on how far I flip, so I'm having to make based on water clarity. Right here, this is a 3/8 ounce. I always use a little glass bead right here. Okay, this is the little stroker crawl from 6 Sense Fishing, and this is a 3/0 jugular offset round bend hook from 6 Sense Fishing as well. That tungsten from 6 Sense Fishing as well. When I'm sight fishing, I put a bobber stop on there and leave a little bit of gap. That's the rig I use for sight fishing. Pretty simplistic. The beautiful part about this rig right here is you don't have to be sight fishing to catch fish on a Texas rig creature bait this time of year, especially as we move on through spring. And here in the next week or two, the brim will start spawning out here at Lake Fork. And when they do, I'm simply going to take this bead off. I'm going to move that bobber stopper down on top of the weight, peg it, and we're going to go flipping outside the brim areas. You can also kind of just go down the bank flipping, you know, shoreline cover, stumps, bushes, vegetation, whatever's up there on the bank. The fish are going to be using it to guard fry, to spawn around, to stage on right before they spawn. So there's going to be fish around shallow cover. There's not much better bait than a Texas rig creature bait. I love the stroker crawl. I like to use it in brim colors. This is green pumpkin. They have a color called bluegill fire. It's very good. Basically, all your colors that imitate a brim, any kind of a natural greens and browns, is what you're going to want to stick to, whatever your preference is. But a Texas rig creature bait, absolutely one of the best ways that you can go back catching fish in the springtime. Now, for rod, I'm using the 7.5 medium heavy Divine series. This is for sight fishing on Lake Fork in particular. We've got a lot of big fish. We've got a lot of heavy cover. There's stumps under the water everywhere where you don't see them. And so when I hook a big fish off a bed, I want to have a little bit bigger rod. This is honestly a bigger rod than what you need for Texas rig fishing, especially like a 1/4 ounce type of Texas rig. I really like the 7.4 medium heavy in the Century series. It's even lighter, still a strong, powerful rod, but even a lighter rod helps me really feel those subtle bites that you get sometimes on a slow moving bait like a Texas rig. You could even step down, if you're more comfortable, do a 7.1 medium heavy in the Century series, but I want the Century series when I'm just flipping a Texas rig. I want to feel those subtle bites, and that Century series from 6 Sense Fishing is the most sensitive rod I've ever put in my hand, so I highly, highly recommend that. Now, on your reel, the big deal is going to be you want a high-speed gear ratio. If that fish bites and comes at you, or if you set the hook and that fish comes at you, you need to be able to catch up to him, and you're not going to move the bait. You're not going to present the bait with the reel handle. You're not winding a Texas rig around. You're flipping it, you're shaking it with your rod, you're moving the bait with your rod. That's how you're giving the bait action. You're simply casting, reeling the bait in, or reeling a fish in with your reel handle, so it doesn't hurt you to have that high-speed gear ratio. So I always like something at least 7 to 1 or higher. On line out here, 20-pound fluorocarbon. I won't go any less. If you're good enough to pitch and cast with 20-pound, I highly suggest doing that. If you struggle a little bit being accurate and pitching with 20-pound, you can step down to 17 or even 15-pound fluorocarbon. It'll be much easier to cast. You'll be able to be much more accurate with those baits. As far as when I'm fishing a Texas rig, it's very simple. I'll give you guys a breakdown. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna be very target oriented. So if I see stumps in the water, bushes on the shoreline, whatever it is I'm fishing, you know, on the brim spawn deal, I'm gonna be pitching to the timber that's out in front and surrounding those brim bed areas. So I'm gonna pitch my bait out there by the cover. And when I do, I'm gonna strip a little bit of line to make sure my bait falls directly, vertically beside the cover. If you don't, that bait will pendulum back towards you when your line goes tight. So we're gonna pitch it out there, strip a couple pieces of line out, make sure it falls straight. Okay, then when I'm working a Texas rig, guys, it's real simple. All I want to do is pull up on my slack, nothing there, give it a little shake, a little hop around that cover, give it a little shake, a little hop around that cover, and usually you'll feel a tick. And when you feel that tick, reel down, check up. If that line is moving at all, slam them home, set the hook as hard as you can, then reel them on in the boat and boat flip them. Or net them if you're like from California or something. You know, that's up to you. Okay, so there's the Texas rig. Now what's bait number 2? You know, man, I don't know anybody that doesn't like this bait right here. Let's talk about the hollow-bodied frog. The hollow-bodied frog makes my top 5 in springtime for sure. Who doesn't love throwing a hollow-bodied frog? The blow-ups you get on frogs are super violent, super intense, and the springtime is probably the best time of year to throw it. There's so many fish, so shallow on the bank, and that frog is so close to them. It's the closest you can ever get your frog to a bunch of fish is in the springtime when a high percentage of them are right on the bank. Also, we tend to get a lot of rain in the springtime, tends to flood the shoreline cover. We get a little flooding vegetation, flooding bushes, flooded cover in the lakes. There's just not another bait that's more efficient to get in close and work around that flooded vegetation and cover than a hollow-bodied frog. Again, as you'll notice, natural colors. A lot of the stuff that I throw in the springtime, guys, is going to imitate brim. I'm either going to be imitating brim or I'm going to be on a shad spawn deal imitating shad. This right here is a spro popping frog. I call her yellow belly, but it's just a yellow bottom and a green top. It could be brown, whatever color you want to go with. A natural color is what I like to. Earlier in the year, we start throwing white. I kind of get away from the white right now. I kind of start going to the greens and browns and yellows, stuff like that. So that's the frog I'm using. Now, one tip I want to give you when you get your frog out of the box, you want to bend your hooks out just a little bit. And this frog's new, so I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how we do that. Right when you get your frog, the hooks are going to be pointed right back into the body, pointed back this way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bend my hooks out. Now, most people take their hooks and they want to bend them up this way. You do not bend your hooks up. That's not, you're going to weaken that frog hook. When you're catching big fish in heavy cover, you need your hook to be strong. So I'm actually going to take that hook, get my pliers on it just like so, and grab the shank and bend it out. Just a little bit. Just enough to get that hook point off the body a little bit, right? That's all I want to do. That way when I run my finger, see my finger caught. That's the deal. You run your finger down there and if your finger catches, you're good. If you run your finger, and I'll squish the body up against it. If you run your finger down the side of your frog and your skin on your finger doesn't catch that hook point, you didn't do it right. We'll try it this side. Yep, we caught right there. Every time. If it goes like this, no bueno. If it stops you, you're good. All right, we're going to use 65-pound braid for line because why not? You want the most line power you can. Like I said, we're throwing in heavy cover. We're dealing with big fish in the springtime, so you want big, bad line. And sometimes you're coming out of, I mean, that alligator weed, that pond weed, that stuff is thick, thick, thick. If you're fishing lily pads, those lily pad stems are thick. You want the biggest, baddest line you can deal with. As far as rod, reel, and line setup go, again, 7-to-1 gear ratio or higher. You're not going to work the frog with your reel handle. You're going to be working it with your rod, so go high speed. High speed reels are going to be important in a lot of spring techniques, and the reason why is you're fishing the bank, and that fish a lot of times doesn't have anywhere to go but straight towards you, so you need to catch up to them. So use high speed gear ratio reels in a lot of these techniques. The rod that I'm using is the 6 Sense Lux series. Now, I don't need a lot of sensitivity in my frog rod because I can see them hit it, if you know what I mean. I'm actually using the 7.6 heavy Lux series rod from 6 Sense Fishing. This rod right here has a ton of backbone. You know, I would actually like a rod that had a little bit more softer tip than this, but this year we've got a lot of flooded cover in the lake. Last year we did as well. So last couple of years I've been using a bigger rod than normal for frog fishing because I'm trying to horse them out of so much heavy cover. So if you've got dense cover in your lakes, go with something like the 7.6 heavy Lux series rod. As far as working a frog, there's really, you know, no wrong way to do it. You can walk it, you can straight pop it in a straight line back towards you. You can give it erratic start-stop cadences. Play around with your cadences with the frog, see which one they bite, and then repeat that. You know, one question I get asked a lot about a frog is, should you wait to set the hook? And in my experience, the answer is not really. By the time that frog blows up on it, there's enough of a shock and awe hesitation. You know, when that frog blows up, you kind of go, boom, and that's about as long as you want to wait. You don't want to sit there and count 1001, 1002. I've heard some people say wait till you feel him. I don't like to do that. A lot of times that fish will come up, grab that frog, have it, pull it under, and let it go. If you wait too long, you're not going to catch that fish. So with me, I'm just twitch, 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 boom, oh, pow. I mean, it's not even a second that I'm waiting. Just the natural moment of hesitation from the shock and awe of seeing that blow up seems to be enough for me. All right, next bait, and one of the most versatile. It's one of my favorite baits to throw in the springtime. We talk about it a lot on this channel. Swim baits. I love swim baits. And swim baits come in all shapes and sizes. We could talk a whole 10 shows about swim baits alone. But the most basic, the most simple, and the most easy one to go get bit on is going to be a 5-inch weedless swim bait. I like throwing them on the owner flashy swimmer hooks a lot in the springtime. You can throw them without the owner flashy swimmer. If not, then take a 5-inch swim bait, get you a 4-aught belly weighted swim bait hook from 6 cents, and get you one of these 6 cents Divine swim baits. These baits have really been getting bit out here lately. I also like the hollow body from Smash Tech Custom Baits as well. Both of those companies are linked below in the description. Go check both of them out. The hollow body from Smash Tech, the Divine 4.4 swim bait from 6 Cents Fishing. This little dude right here gets them. As you can see, this is a bluegill colored swim bait. This color right here is called bluegill fire. It's brown on the bottom, green pumpkin on top. Got all kinds of sparkly flakes. We got some orange flakes, some blue flakes, some purple flake. Really looks a lot like a little brim. Guys, this time of year fish are spawning and the brim are terrorizing them, so they hate brim. They're mad at them, they want to bite them, they want to eat them. Also, the brim start spawning, and then the bass that are recovering from the spawn, that are post-spawn, pick on those brim to recover from the spawning cycle. So bluegill, brim, whatever you want to call them, is a big, big factor this time of year. As far as your setup goes, the 7.5 medium heavy with a fast tip from 6 Cents Fishing in the Divine series. Awesome rod for swim baits. This is a perfectly made rod for small swim baits. I'm telling you guys, it's great. It's as good as it gets. Now on swim baits, you can go 7-to-1 on that as well, but you really have to mind your reel handle. I would recommend going like 6-3-to-1, something like that for the weedless swim baits, especially if you're starting out. If you're a little more experienced and you can have the discipline to slow yourself down, then you can go higher speed, and that gives you that catch-up power that you're looking for. As far as line goes, again, 20-pound fluorocarbon. I like to throw as big a line as I can get away with. If you have trouble casting this bait, because it's not the heaviest bait, if you have trouble casting it on a 20-pound line, then step down to 17. Always go with the biggest line you can get away with, up to about 20-pound test, when you're fishing lakes like we have here in East Texas with big fish, big heavy cover. As far as the technique on a swim bait, it's as simple as it gets. I want to get that bait. One beautiful thing about the weedless swim bait is it comes through pretty much anything. So I'm going to cast that bait out there, get it close to cover, and I'm going to point the rod straight at the line. No angle coming out of my rod with my line. Straight at the line and just reel a nice medium retrieve. Just keep that bait moving just enough to keep the tail kicking. When they bite, kind of keep reeling until you feel a little bit of weight, and then slam the hook as hard as you can. One thing you got to remember, this is not a crankbait. You do not want to jerk as soon as you feel a tick. This hook on this bait is rigged the same way a Texas rig is. Therefore, you need to set the hook the same way you do on a Texas rig. So when you're reeling, when you get a bite on a Texas rig, we talked about this earlier. Boom, you get a bite on Texas rig. You point your rod down, reel up your slack, and you check and see if that fish is there, right? You need to do the same thing on these weedless swim baits. The difference is on a swim bait, you don't have to point your rod down. Your rod's already pointed down. You don't have to reel in your slack. You're already reeling. Just keep reeling at that same speed you were. And once you feel, first time you feel a little bit of that weight, slam them home just like you do on a Texas rig. All right, let's talk about the next bait. This is gonna be one of my favorites. We don't talk about this bait enough these days. We used to talk about it a lot. This is gonna be the Movement 80X, okay? Movement 80X can serve many purposes. One of the best bites around is when the brim starts spawning. You can just kind of go into pockets and go down windy banks. Okay, especially if you've seen brim beds and you know there's brim beds in there, go down the windy banks and throw a bluegill color. This is called baby bluegill. That's the color this one is. Throw a bluegill colored shallow diving crankbait. This Movement 80X is my favorite. It's got the most hard thumping wobble. It bounces off hard cover better than any crankbait I've ever thrown. That's one of the reasons I love it so much. I can go down heavily wooded banks and just bang this thing off everything, and very, very rarely will it get hung up. But I catch some really big bass pretty much every year when those brim get to spawning on windy banks, throwing this bluegill colored shallow diving crankbait. Absolutely love it. Beautiful thing is also, switch that over to a shad color, get around some shad spawn, out on the shallow points, out on the clay banks, you see some shad spawn activity going on. You can change it to a shad color moving 80X and catch their butts over there on that pattern too. Now this is not your normal square bill. If I was gonna throw a normal square bill, I would want something in the 7 foot, 7-1, medium heavy type of category. This bait has more drag. It has such a hard wobble, it causes a lot more drag. So the rod that I'm using on this has actually stepped up a little bit. I'm using this right here is a 7.4 medium heavy Century series rod. Another rod that's very good for the Movement 80X is going to be the 7.3 heavy in the Lux series. Now this is one where I do step down my line because this is a very shallow diving crankbait. It does not get very deep. So I want to step my line down to 17 pound or even 15 pound fluorocarbon to get that bait down a couple feet. If not, if you throw 20 pound, you're going to have a hard time getting this bait much under a foot, foot and a half below the surface. So to get it down a couple feet, I'm going to go down in line size. Gear ratio on the crankbait, again, just like the swim bait, if you have the reel discipline to slow down enough to fish the high-speed reels, then it's great. But for most people, I would highly recommend going with a 6.3 to 1 or even a 5 to 1. Really, on the shallow diving crankbaits, your 6.3 to 1 reel will do just fine. And last, but certainly not least, Z-Dub would be proud that this made my top 5 spring baits. But this is probably the most dependable bite getter in your boat in the spring, folks. We're going to talk about the Wacky worm. Now right here we've got a Wacky Rig Divine Shaky Head Worm. I'm throwing this on a #1 Gamakatsu Finesse wide gap weedless hook. This is a watermelon red color. Any of your natural greens, depending on cloud cover, sometimes you need the darker colors. Basically you want to make your color choice depending on watercolor and conditions of that day. Generally speaking, the darker the conditions, the dirtier the water, the darker the skies, the darker color worm you need. The clearer the water, the brighter the skies, the more translucent, more natural colored worm you need. Watermelon red is a really good choice for most conditions. The rod that I'm throwing this right here on is going to be a 7.1 medium heavy. Now that's a very heavy rod for Wacky worm. Again, I oversize a lot of my gear because of where I fish. The big fish, the big heavy cover. Really this needs to be thrown on about a 6'10" to 7 foot medium action rod. Now you can get one of those in the Lux series. I do have a couple of those. I do throw Wacky worms on them sometimes. But on Lake Fork, again, these Century series rods are so dang light, I can get away with throwing a lighter bait on an overpowered rod, and I like to have that extra control. The line I'm throwing it on is going to be 15 pound fluorocarbon. This is another bait that we do not put the action on the bait with the reel handle, we do it with the rod. So of course we're going high speed 7 to 1 gear ratio reels or higher. A Wacky worm to work, it's pretty simple. Again, it's like the Texas rig, it's very target oriented. I want to throw it next to grass edges, I want to throw it next to stumps, dock pylons. I want to throw it to a target. Same thing, we're going to throw it out there and then strip a little bit of line and let it fall. So we get it out there, we'll strip a little bit of line, let it fall straight vertically beside the target. Once we have taken time, this is a big part of Wacky worm fishing, make sure you take your time to let that worm get all the way to the bottom. It falls very, very slow. We are putting a half of a 1/32 nail weight in the head of that Divine Shaky Head worm to get it to sink and get it to fall nose down. Really, more so than castability or making it sink faster, it's about that worm falling head first. In a bass's world, if you think about a fish that's acting aggressively, think about sight fishing. A fish that's sitting like this or sinking like this is not an aggressive fish. But a fish that's doing this is in an aggressive posture. And to me, these fish are so defensive and so aggressive in the springtime. When they see something smaller than them in an aggressive posture, I think it keys something in for them to go get them. Could make no sense at all. It's just my own thesis on it. All right, so once the bait's falling all the way to the bottom, again, just like texture, I'm gonna lift up and feel, then we'll give it a little bit of shake and hop action right here. Let me get over here to the side, make sure y'all can see this. Okay, so we're gonna let it get to the bottom, we're gonna check up, feel, okay, no fish. Now when you do this, if your line's heavy, just hold light tension. If it doesn't move, it's not a fish. If it's a fish, it'll move. As soon as it moves a little bit, reel down and drop the hammer. But once I feel, okay, there's no fish there, I'm gonna just give it little poppy shakes, just pop, pop, pop. You try to make that worm go, and then it'll fall back nose down to the bottom. That's the action you're trying to impart on it. Once you've hopped it away from the target 2 or 3 times, go ahead and bring it on in, hit the next target. Well, there you go, guys. There's my personal top 5 bait picks for the spring. Now, you can use those 5 and try to see how they work out for you, or you can go get kind of your own deal going and figure out your own top 5. There's certainly a lot of different ways to do it. Topwater walking bait should be in here, bigger swim bait should be in here, Carolina rig should be in here. Man, there's a lot of different things. that can work right now. Swim jigs are great right now. Chatterbaits are phenomenal. And chatterbaits like my favorite bait of all time, so I don't know how it didn't make it, but you know, you just can't pick all of them when you're limited to 5, so that's the way it is. Hey, one thing about it, you know, as far as a quick review over areas, guys, spawn in pockets. Look for areas, like right now, the main lake's a pretty good long ways out there. These fish are gonna spawn back in protected coves and areas. Most of us that fish know what a spawning pocket looks like. But what you wanna do is find areas where those fish can get back in calmer waters, shallower water where the wind won't blow as hard. But honestly, around here, once we get to this time of year, these fish will kind of start spawning most places. I never really particularly look for spawning fish on the main lake itself, but things that are very close to the main lake, little corners, little subtle cuts, can hold some quality fish once we get to this time of year. So anything that's cut out from the main lake and offers a little protection from the fish can be in play right now. I tell people all the time here lately, last couple weeks, they ask me, hey, what area of the lake's fishing good? I'm like, man, the whole lake is fishing, and it is. That's not just me trying to blow them off. Like, the entire lake fish is good this time of year. So get some things that you have confidence in. Get in some areas you have confidence in and just get after them. It's a beautiful time of year to be a bass fisherman. It's kind of the time of year we all wait for. So hopefully you guys are out there catching bass. Hopefully this will help you catch more and bigger fish. I know we certainly appreciate you guys watching. Check out our sponsors, 6centsfishing.com. When you get over there, be sure you punch in that code, your Lake Fork Guide. Get a 10% discount on all orders, as well as Smash Tech Baits, link below as well. All these reels that you guys see me using, they're all Lou's reels. I trust Lou's. I put different people with different skill levels in my boat, and Lou's does a phenomenal job of providing me reels that not only do they look great, are they light, but they work for people of all experience levels. I have very little backlash, overrun issues, no matter who picks up my Lou's reels, because they are such well-made pieces of equipment. So big shout out to Lou's. They're linked below as well. Hey, most importantly, thank each and every one of you for watching. We'll see you next time right here on your Lake Fork Guide.